used to think the world was fair. That if I worked hard, stayed honest, and treated people right, life would return the favor. It didn't. I watched people with half my talent move faster, live better, and get away with things I didn't even dare to try. I watched them charm rooms, break rules, and still be admired. And I remember thinking, maybe I'm missing something. Turns out I was. What I didn't understand back then was that life isn't a meritocracy. It's a psychological game, and most people are too proud or too naive to play it well. I used to resent that. Now I respect it. Because when you finally stop demanding fairness and start studying the mechanics of power, something inside you shifts. You stop waiting. You start moving. You stop being the one who gets overlooked. You become the one who is quietly, dangerously, impossible to ignore. This isn't a motivational speech. It's a confession. Let me tell you what I've learned. 10 principles that changed everything about how I see people, respect, and influence. Principle 1. Fairness is a psychological trap. Fairness is the first and most dangerous illusion we're taught to believe. It's whispered into our minds from childhood. That good things happen to good people, that patience is rewarded, that the world eventually balances its scales. But look closer. Watch long enough, and you'll see the cracks in that story. You'll see people who cheat the system winning applause. You'll see the quiet ones waiting for their turn, while others rewrite the rules mid-game. You'll see kindness treated as weakness, patience mistaken for permission, and sincerity dismissed as naivety. That's when the truth begins to sink in. Fairness isn't the foundation of order. It's the illusion that keeps the powerless obedient. It's the lullaby that keeps good men asleep while cunning men build empires. I learned this not from theory, but from humiliation. Years ago, I was passed over for a promotion I had earned. The man who got it wasn't smarter or more qualified. He was simply more strategic. He smiled at the right moments, told harmless jokes that made people feel included, and made others feel small without them noticing. He played the room like a piano, one note at a time until everyone was dancing to his rhythm. That day, I stopped believing in fairness, and something inside me changed. Not into bitterness, but clarity. I started to see the invisible machinery behind every interaction. How guilt is used to keep you compliant. How niceness is used as leverage. How institutions feed obedience under the guise of morality. How charm can be a weapon sharpened with practice. I began to realize that fairness is not a law. It's a story we tell to feel safe. It's a social leash to keep you predictable, and predictability is death in the arena of power. Once you stop being hypnotized by fairness, people can no longer play you. When you stop expecting reciprocity, manipulation loses its grip. When you stop assuming people mean well, you start seeing what they actually want. That's when power quietly shifts, not to the loudest or the cruelest, but to the one who sees reality as it is. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago when he wrote, "Men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries, but heavy ones they cannot." He wasn't talking about violence. He was describing human nature. If you wound someone's pride halfway, you create an enemy for life. But if you establish psychological dominance completely, not through cruelty, but through conviction, they surrender. So don't play halfway. Half kindness breeds resentment. Half boundaries invite abuse. Half truths create confusion. Either give fully or detach completely. Either commit to the game or walk off the board. The world doesn't reward sincerity. It rewards precision. It respects those who understand that fairness is not a promise. It's a performance. And when you finally stop acting in that performance, you stop waiting for the world to treat you right. You start treating yourself as the authority. That's when power begins. Not in the chase for fairness, but in the quiet moment you stop needing it. Principle 2. Ruthlessness is emotional discipline. Most people hear the word ruthless and immediately picture cruelty, sharp tongues, cold stares, and brutal ambition. But that's not ruthlessness. That's insecurity in armor. Real ruthlessness isn't about hurting others. It's about never allowing others to hurt your peace. It's emotional control so precise that no one can turn your feelings into a leash. I remember the first time someone called me ruthless. It wasn't after I insulted anyone or raised my voice. It was the day I stopped explaining myself. A coworker once lied about me in a meeting. He twisted the story so smoothly that for a moment, I almost believed it myself. Everyone waited for me to defend my name, but I didn't. I just sat there, calm, silent, watching. Then I stopped including him in my plans. 6 months later, he was gone. No revenge, no shouting, no proof needed. I simply starved the lie of oxygen until it died. That's what emotional discipline looks like. Stillness while the room shakes. Composure while others test your limits. Most people think reacting shows strength. They rush to respond, to explain, to prove their innocence. But reaction is the easiest form of manipulation. If I can make you angry, I own your focus. If I can make you justify yourself, I own your frame. If I can make you chase fairness, I own your peace. The ruthless man doesn't react. He observes. He listens for patterns, not noise. He studies motive, not emotion. He knows that silence unsettles the weak far more than anger ever could. When someone provokes you, they're not looking for truth. They're looking for control. Every defensive text, every emotional reply, every desperate justification is a surrender in disguise. A drop of power spilled on the ground. The ruthless man doesn't spill. He lets silence do the bleeding for him. There's a kind of sacred quiet in ruthlessness. You breathe slowly while others lose composure. You smile when they rage, not out of arrogance, but out of understanding. You walk away from what disturbs your center. Not because you're cold, but because you value your stability more than their validation. The world reads that calm as danger, because it is. People can't manipulate what doesn't react. They can't predict what doesn't perform. And they can't control what doesn't explain. That's why emotional control terrifies manipulators. It exposes their dependence on chaos. It reveals their need to see you shaken, because calm men are ungovernable. Machiavelli wrote that wise men act from necessity, not from anger. That's the heart of ruthlessness. Measured response. No emotion wasted. No word unnecessary. You don't win by being louder. You win by being unshakable. Because when your emotions are no longer anyone's playground, you stop being part of their story. Ruthlessness isn't cruelty. It's clarity. The calm recognition that your peace is not a community project. It belongs entirely to you. Principle 3. Psychological dominance over likability. For most of my life, I thought being liked meant being safe. If people approved of me, they wouldn't hurt me. If they smiled when I entered the room, I was doing something right. But I was wrong. Being liked doesn't protect you. It exposes you. Because the people who like you know exactly which version of you to expect. And when people can predict you, they can control you. Approval is a leash disguised as affection. It teaches you to move only when someone tugs. There was a woman once, radiant, confident, the kind whose presence makes even the air feel self-conscious. I liked her too much, and she could feel it. I tried to make her laugh, to show her how thoughtful I was, to be the man she couldn't ignore. And the harder I tried, the smaller I felt. Her eyes softened, but her interest faded. It was like handing someone your crown and asking them to notice the shine. Then, one day, something in me snapped. I stopped performing. I stopped reaching out first. I stopped trying to be understood. And suddenly, the air shifted. She asked questions she never used to ask. She wanted to know what I was thinking. She wanted my time again. That's when I understood. Likability is dependence. And dependence kills attraction, authority, and respect. You don't gain power by being easy to love. You gain it by being difficult to access. Psychological dominance isn't about fear. It's about scarcity. It's about making your energy valuable enough that people notice when it's missing. Because what's always available is never appreciated. Machiavelli once wrote that it's safer to be feared than loved. In the modern world, the word fear translates to respect with distance. When people can't read you completely, they behave better around you. They measure their words, control their tone, and stay aware of your presence. That's not intimidation. That's gravity. It's what happens when your silence carries more meaning than most people's noise. People crave predictability. It makes them feel in control. But when you move outside their expectations, when you stop giving emotional cues, stop over-explaining, stop chasing validation, you shift the balance. You become the unknown variable in every equation. And the unknown is always powerful. The truth is, likability is cheap currency. You trade your authenticity for small doses of comfort. But dominance, real, quiet dominance, is earned through self-containment. It's the art of revealing just enough, but never everything. Stop asking, do they like me? Ask instead, do they adjust themselves when I enter the room? Because when people start to calibrate around you, slow their words, measure their tone, rethink their jokes, that's respect. And respect will take you further than affection ever could. Don't aim to be the man everyone loves. Aim to be the one everyone notices when he says nothing at all. That's psychological dominance. Not cruelty, not arrogance, just presence so steady it bends the air around it. Principle 4. Decisive action creates authority. Authority isn't granted by title or permission. It's recognized through behavior. It's the unspoken acknowledgement that you mean what you say, and that saying it once is enough. Most people never reach that point. They talk endlessly, promise recklessly, threaten idly. They confuse noise with leadership, emotion with strength. They make 10 warnings and follow through on none. And every time they fail to act, they teach others a dangerous lesson. Your words don't matter. A weak man warns before he acts. A strong man acts before he warns. I learned this truth the hard way. For years, I had a friend who constantly broke promises. He'd cancel plans, borrow money he never returned, show up only when it was convenient. Each time, I forgave him, telling myself I was being loyal, patient, understanding. But patience without consequence is permission. And one day, I finally understood. He called again, offering another excuse, another story. I cut him off mid-sentence. "Don't bother," I said. "You're done." He laughed, thinking I was bluffing. I wasn't. That was the last time we spoke. It wasn't revenge, it was precision. And for the first time in that friendship, I felt peace. Decisive action doesn't require anger or explanation. It speaks an older language, one of cause and consequence. It says, "This is where I end and you begin." Cross it once, and you lose access. When people see you act with quiet finality, they reorganize themselves around your boundaries. They realize that your patience is not infinite, and your forgiveness is not free. But if they sense hesitation, if they notice you negotiating your limits, they'll test you again and again. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "If an injury must be done, let it be so severe that vengeance is unnecessary." He wasn't endorsing cruelty. He was teaching clarity, the wisdom of final decisions. Because half punishments invite rebellion, half boundaries invite disrespect, half commitments invite chaos. A clear no is stronger than 1,000 maybes. A calm decision carries more power than a heated argument. One act of quiet certainty can correct years of misplaced generosity. I've learned that decisive action is not aggression. It's alignment. It's the moment when your external behavior finally matches your internal truth. When your boundaries stop being theories and start being realities. Most people think they lose love when they enforce boundaries. But what they really lose are the people who were benefiting from their lack of them. Authority doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from controlling yourself so completely that others instinctively adapt to your structure. When you act decisively, your silence becomes enough. When you hesitate, even your loudest words fall flat. Weakness negotiates, strength implements, and the man who acts once with conviction commands more respect than the man who pleads 100 times for understanding. So the next time someone crosses a line, don't warn them. Don't explain why it hurts. Just show them what happens when you stop tolerating what insults your dignity. That's not cruelty. That's command. Principle 5. Perception management is reality control. The truth doesn't win. The story about the truth does. For a long time, I believed that skill spoke for itself. That if I worked hard enough, if my results were solid, people would notice. But they didn't. I watched less capable people climb faster, speak louder, and get more credit. They weren't better. They were better seen. And that's when it hit me. The world doesn't reward merit. It rewards presentation. Machiavelli once wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." 5 centuries later, it's still the most accurate sentence ever written about human psychology. People don't see your intentions. They see your posture, your tone, your pauses, your confidence, or your lack of it. You can be brilliant and still invisible if your presence doesn't signal authority. I stopped waiting to be understood and started curating what was visible. Not lying, not pretending, just understanding that even silence is a form of storytelling. Every gesture communicates something. The way you enter a room, the way you make eye contact, or avoid it. The way your voice carries or collapses under pressure. Once I became aware of that, everything changed. I adjusted small things. I stood straighter. I spoke slower. I let pauses hang longer. I allowed silence to fill the space instead of rushing to fill it with explanations. And suddenly, people started listening more carefully. Not because I'd become smarter, but because I'd become intentional. the world believes what looks deliberate. Confidence, even if it's quiet, triggers respect. Insecurity, even if hidden behind words, leaks through. Perception is a game of symbols. It's not about faking who you are. It's about framing who you are in a way that your reality can be received. If you walk into a room with steady eyes and calm energy, people assume competence before you even speak. If you start every sentence with an apology, you're teaching them to doubt you. If you talk too much about your goodness, they suspect your motives. But if you let your composure speak for you, they'll write a story about your strength, even if you never claim it. The truth doesn't live in facts. It lives in interpretation. That's why reputation is currency. In a world overloaded with information, people don't have time to know you deeply. They rely on symbols, cues, to decide what you're worth. That's why perception is not manipulation. It's survival. You are always branding yourself. Even in stillness, your image is not vanity, it's strategy. And strategy is simply awareness turned into art. So control the narrative of who you are before someone else does it for you. Show less. Reveal slowly. Let curiosity work in your favor. Because mystery multiplies value. The truth is secondary to presence. And presence, that quiet, deliberate gravity, is the truth people actually believe. Don't just be competent. Look like someone who knows they are. Because the world doesn't reward the best. It rewards the best presented. Principle 6. Narrative control is psychological warfare. Every story can be told two ways. One where you're the villain, and one where you're the hero. Both versions can be true, but only one will survive. That's the essence of power. The ability to define the story. If you don't control the frame, someone else will write it for you, and they'll write it in their favor. I learned this the hard way. I ended a toxic partnership once. He had charm, influence, and a talent for playing the victim. When I finally walked away, he spread the story first. He told everyone I was cold, disloyal, power-hungry, and people believed him. Because silence, in the wrong context, looks like guilt. At first, I wanted to defend myself. I drafted long messages explaining the truth, trying to correct every lie. But I stopped. Because defending yourself keeps you stuck inside someone else's frame. You're still playing the game they designed. So I did something different. I reframed the story, not with denial, with redefinition. I told people I had learned to protect my peace, that sometimes walking away isn't betrayal, it's clarity. And suddenly, the narrative flipped. People didn't see coldness anymore. They saw boundaries, same event, different story. That's narrative warfare. You don't have to win every argument. You just have to make your version the one that lasts. Because facts don't move people. Meaning does. And whoever provides the meaning wins the audience. Look around. Politicians, influencers, corporations. They all fight the same war of perception. They understand that the truth is flexible, but emotion is permanent. Control the emotion, and you own the memory. That's why your story must always come first. When you make a hard decision, don't defend it. Frame it. When you fail, don't explain. Redefine. Failure framed as learning becomes evolution. Rejection framed as redirection becomes growth. Every loss, told the right way, becomes a chapter of strength instead of shame. And when someone attacks you, don't waste energy proving your innocence. Expose their motive. Shift the lens. Make the audience question why they felt the need to attack you in the first place. Once you reframe intent, the accusation collapses on its own. Machiavelli understood this long before social media existed. Men in general judge more by the eye than by the hand. He meant that appearances, impressions, and stories shape judgment far more than truth ever does. The human mind craves coherence, not accuracy. It wants a version of reality that feels consistent, not necessarily one that's real. So the one who organizes chaos into narrative, who gives others a clean storyline to believe, becomes the hidden ruler of perception. Control the impression, and you control memory. Control memory, and you control reputation. Control reputation, and you control opportunity. You can't rewrite every fact, but you can decide what those facts mean. And meaning, in the end, is what people remember. That's narrative warfare, the art of turning truth into architecture. And once you learn to build your own story, you'll never again live inside someone else's version of it. Principle 7. Systematic consequences build respect. There comes a moment in every person's life when exhaustion becomes clarity. I reached that point the day I realized I was tired. Not of people, but of managing them emotionally. Tired of explaining my worth. Tired of asking for respect that should have been obvious. Tired of repeating the same boundaries like a broken record no one bothered to hear. That's when I understood something simple but liberating. Begging for respect is exhausting. Training for it is not. So I stopped warning people about my limits. I stopped writing essays to justify my distance. Instead, I built systems. Small, automatic mechanisms of consequence that made my boundaries self-enforcing. If someone wasted my time, I became unavailable. If someone lied, they lost direct access to me. If someone disrespected me once, they got silence instead of confrontation. No anger, no guilt, no lecture, just system. Because systems are cold, and cold is clear. People can argue with emotion. They can manipulate empathy, but they can't argue with gravity. You don't debate gravity. You adapt to it. And that's the beauty of structure. When you stop managing people with explanations and start managing them with predictable consequences, you shift the balance of power. You no longer chase accountability. You create it. Machiavelli wrote, "A wise ruler relies on what he controls, not on what others control." You can't control someone's respect. You can only control their access. So I made respect the price of admission. It wasn't an act of arrogance. It was maintenance. Just like a locked door doesn't hate the world. It simply protects what's valuable inside. Once people realize that access to you is conditional, they begin to adjust. They start measuring their words. They show up on time. They remember your boundaries without being reminded. Because systems teach better than speeches ever could. The most peaceful part of this approach is that it maintains itself. I no longer had to chase apologies or demand accountability. The structure did the work. And what I discovered was something profound. People respect what they must adapt to. When they see that your boundaries are consistent, not emotional, they start believing them. They realize that your no isn't anger, it's policy. And policy earns more respect than passion. I stopped using emotion to correct behavior. I used absence. Distance became my teacher. Because nothing teaches faster than silence from the person who once gave attention freely. Systems make relationships honest. They filter the lazy, the entitled, and the careless. Not through confrontation, but through consequence. The moment you stop managing others through emotion, you start managing your life through structure. And that's the essence of authority. Because real power doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain. It simply builds systems that make disrespect impossible to sustain. And once you learn to live that way, peace isn't something you ask for. It's the only environment your world allows. Principle 8. Silent dominance is ultimate power. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout, it doesn't posture, it doesn't perform. It simply exists. Steady, unbothered, undeniable. The loudest man in the room is almost never the most powerful. He's usually the most insecure. His volume is camouflage, his bravado a form of begging. He's trying to convince the world and himself that he's strong. But the truly dangerous man doesn't need to convince anyone. He moves quietly, and people feel it before they understand it. They sense something different about him, a gravity that makes noise irrelevant. I met a man like that once. Older, calm, eyes like still water. He didn't dominate the room with words, but with presence. When he spoke, it was measured. Every sentence had weight. He never raised his voice, never rushed to fill silence. Instead, he asked questions that forced you to rethink your certainty. In 5 minutes, he could unravel your entire argument. Not by attacking, but by revealing how little of it you'd thought through. He didn't need to win. His composure did the winning for him. That's when I understood. Command isn't loud. It's quiet and complete. Silent dominance isn't about secrecy. It's about discretion. It's the art of knowing when to reveal and when to withhold. It's power that proves itself through outcomes, not declarations. A lion doesn't need to roar to be respected. A fox doesn't need to boast about his cunning. Each moves according to nature, one with strength, the other with calculation. Machiavelli said, "A lion cannot protect himself from traps, and a fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must be both." That's the balance. Strength without strategy is brute force. Strategy without strength is paralysis. Silent dominance lives between those two. Calm, precise, prepared. In silence, you gather information. You notice what others miss. Tone shifts, hidden alliances, the small betrayals masked as jokes. You study patterns until people's motives become predictable. You choose timing so well that when you finally act, it feels inevitable. And when you do act, the world calls it sudden. They think you moved overnight. But you know the truth. You were preparing all along. You were patient while they were noisy. You were observing while they were performing. You were building something invisible. Psychological gravity. Silent dominance doesn't crave credit. It doesn't need validation, because validation is for those who doubt. There's a reason silence makes people uncomfortable. It reveals them. They start filling it with words, with confessions, with insecurity. You learn more about people by saying nothing than by interrogating them. So speak less. Move slower. Observe more. Let others underestimate you. Let them think silence is weakness. Because when the moment finally demands action, your precision will strike louder than their entire history of noise. That's real dominance. The kind felt, not flaunted. The kind that doesn't need attention because attention naturally bends toward it. Power that is spoken can be challenged. Power that is felt cannot. Principle 9. Detachment is the root of freedom. Machiavelli never wrote the word detachment, but he lived it. His writings hinted at a truth deeper than strategy. That power doesn't belong to the one who holds the most, but to the one who needs the least. Every time you tie your emotions to an outcome, you surrender control. Every time you need someone to agree, to love, or to validate you, you place your peace in their hands. And the moment they withdraw it, you fall apart. That's not strength. That's captivity. True power begins the moment you no longer need permission to move. When your decisions stop depending on applause, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability, that quiet self-sufficiency, is the foundation of freedom. I learned this during the worst year of my life. I lost someone I loved. I lost a job that I thought defined me. I lost my sense of identity, my direction, my pride. Everything that made me dissolved. At first, it felt like drowning. Every plan I had built disappeared overnight, and there was nothing to hold on to. But in that emptiness, something unexpected surfaced. Peace. Because when you lose everything, you also lose fear. You stop being afraid of failure when you've already met it. You stop chasing approval when there's no one left to impress. You stop pretending when the mask no longer fits. That's when I began to understand the quiet power of detachment. From that point forward, every decision became simple. Not easy, but clear. If something aligned with my values, I said yes. If it didn't, I walked away. No debate, no resentment. Detachment doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without clinging. It's saying, I can love this deeply, but I don't depend on it to feel whole. I can invest in this path, but if it collapses, I remain. Most people mistake detachment for coldness because they've never seen calm without dependence. But detachment isn't cold. It's clean. It's a state where your emotions still exist, but they no longer rule you. You start to see the world clearly, without distortion, without desperation. And clarity is the purest form of power. The world only manipulates people who crave something. Comfort, approval, control, certainty. When you no longer crave those things, manipulation breaks against you, like waves on rock. People can't control a person who's ready to walk away. Machiavelli hinted at this in his lessons on rulers. Never become too attached to fortune, because fortune shifts like wind. If you build your identity on outcomes, the first storm destroys you. If you build it on inner stability, no storm touches you. Detachment is not avoidance. It's endurance. It's walking through chaos without absorbing it. It's loving without losing yourself. It's standing in loss and still choosing direction. Every other principle, fairness, dominance, ruthlessness, depends on this one. Because without detachment, your power is conditional. But once you master it, you become untouchable. The world stops owning you. You still play the game, but you're no longer afraid to lose. And that's when freedom begins. Principle 10. Stillness is the final weapon. After all the strategies, all the calculations, all the psychological frameworks, it always comes down to this: stillness. Power without peace becomes paranoia. Strategy without silence turns into noise, and success without stillness eventually eats itself alive. Stillness isn't stagnation. It's not passivity or withdrawal. It's mastery, the quiet kind, the one that doesn't need applause or confirmation. It's what remains when every impulse to prove yourself finally dies out. You've studied people. You've seen their games, the politics, the flattery, the subtle wars of tone and posture. You've learned how power moves, how influence flows, how emotions manipulate. And one day, you realize you no longer need to keep fighting for position, because you've already built your position within yourself. Stillness begins where ego ends. It's that moment when you can sit in silence and feel no urge to correct anyone's perception of you. When someone misunderstands you and you no longer need to explain. When people gossip and you no longer feel the sting. Because your sense of worth stopped living in their words. There's a strange calm that follows this shift. The same calm you see in seasoned fighters. The ones who don't flinch anymore. Because they've seen enough to know that panic never changes the outcome. They don't rush. They don't react. They respond. That's what stillness feels like. The mind becoming clear water after years of storms. I still walk into rooms where the games are being played. The same politics, the same manipulation, the same hunger for control. But I don't participate anymore. I just watch. I let people reveal themselves through their need for noise. Because those who can't sit quietly will always betray their intentions. I no longer need to move every piece on the board. Because I've already built a life that doesn't depend on the board. That's the secret they never teach you. Real freedom isn't escaping the game. It's realizing you don't need to win it to be whole. Machiavelli taught the mechanics of power. He understood how people behave, how fear and respect drive decisions. But Carver, through his silences, his restraint, his small moments, taught the soul of it. He understood that the deepest power doesn't shout, it listens. It's the quiet pulse beneath chaos. Both were right. One built the architecture of strategy. The other revealed the humanity that makes it bearable. The highest form of power is not dominance. It's tranquility under pressure. It's when chaos moves around you, but never through you. When nothing external can touch your internal rhythm. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It's the mastery of it. The art of knowing when to act and when to stay still, when to speak and when silence is louder. The world rewards those who move fast, but it bows to those who can stand motionless and still command attention. Because stillness, in the end, is the final weapon, the quiet that conquers noise, the calm that outlasts chaos, and the peace that no power can buy. Epilogue, the dangerous calm. When I look back, I barely recognize the man who used to beg for fairness. He believed goodness guaranteed safety, that effort earned respect, that sincerity would be enough. He was too gentle for the world he lived in, a world that rewards clarity, not hope. I'm not harder now, just clearer. I've learned that kindness without boundaries is self-erasure, that love without respect turns into dependency, and that fairness, without power to enforce it, is nothing more than fiction. These 10 principles were never about becoming cruel. They were about becoming conscious. The goal isn't to manipulate others. It's to navigate them. Because when you finally understand the hidden mechanics of human behavior, guilt loses its grip. Approval loses its lure. Fear loses its shape. You stop reacting. You start designing. And then, something changes in the air around you. People can't name it, but they feel it. A gravity, a quiet certainty, a dangerous calm. It's not charisma, it's sovereignty. And it begins the moment you stop chasing fairness and start mastering yourself.